And welcome back to another fantastic, fabulous session of Daat Tevunot. Okay, what I have done this week is decided to take pictures of the book that we all have and actually read from there, because I was getting a little upset with the translation, actually. Now I realize I don't really have the Hebrew in front of me. Okay, well, if I jump to Hebrew, I'm just going to jump and not show you inside. But if you have the book, we are on page 61. 61 at the bottom, the words furthermore. So that's 69. That doesn't help. Let's try here. 61. There we go. And I just need to. Oh, Uri, can you see?
Too much. Too much.
Fine. Okay. Oh, come on. You see, it's gonna have all these.
Can't see anything. Now I can see. Now it's better. Now it's much better. Now it's quite good.
Up at the words furthermore. Okay. Okay. One of you have a bit of a background going on, but Don, I think that could. Is that you?
Is that in the background? Hold on, let me mute.
Are you watching?
Oh.
Are you watching the news? Oh, much better. Okay.
The kids are sorry.
Okay, no. Baruch Hashem. Okay, furthermore, by the way, do you see where my mouse is or not? You can? You can see the mouse? So
yeah,
then I don't have.
Good. You can see the cursor.
Okay, cursor, thank you. Furthermore. Oh, okay. Furthermore, since God concealed his presence only in order to reveal his glory at a later date and bring us back to him, even the free choice we now have will not exist forever. So, obviously, right, when the Gilui Yichud happens, when this great revelation of God being the only one, the unique one, so then our free choice will disappear as well. This situation where our actions determine whether God bestows good or bad on. Oh, come on, we should be able to go this way. That's 61 again, I'm sorry. Okay, there you go. On the world, based on the preponderance of our deeds. So that's kind of the way the world works, right? Right now, there's what's called sechar v'onesh, in terms of God, rewarding people for mitzvot, punishing people for their sins, will not last forever. God has decided on the time period necessary for the rectification of all souls that he created. Some of them will achieve this through their own righteousness, others through sincere repentance, and yet others through the sufferings they will have to endure. Very interesting. So we have a tradition that there are 600,000 neshamot, 600,000 souls that need to descend to this world. There have been definitely many more than 600,000 people, and even if you want to say it's Jewish souls, there have been many more than 600,000 Jewish souls that have come to this world. So the little I know of these matters is that one of two things has happened, three things. Either souls keep coming back, that's reincarnation, but still there are many more. Right now there are many more than 600,000 Jews alive. So souls are split. That's where the Jewish concept of soulmate comes from, right? That the especially man and wife are to be regarded as one soul. And then there is the idea of souls occupying many bodies at the same time. That's when I stopped to understand anything. Anyway, there's such an idea that these souls need to come to the world. And it's very interesting here because it sounds like eventually God's plan will be fulfilled, meaning that there'll be a rectification of all the souls, meaning some through righteousness, that's pathway number one, others through sincere repentance. We know that from many stories that of the Talmud, that people who were pretty bad but repented managed to, right? Now, in terms of this whole construct, you can understand repentance in a very profound way, right? Repentance is the turning from all the evil in the world and saying, God, I see there's no fulfillment without you. You are it. I must cleave to you. Once a person clarifies that, well, the purpose of his creation has been fulfilled because he has now clarified what was needed to be clarified, right? It's the coming to that understanding of the unity. And yet others through sufferings, they will have to endure. Somehow that too will bring a person to this deep realization. Okay, the time limit God made is 6,000 years, as our sages have stated in the Talmud, Rosh Hashanah, Sanhedrin. God made the world for 6,000 years, like the 6 days of creation. After that, God will transform the whole world, and humans will become like purely spiritual beings rather than like donkeys, right? We'll lose this thick physicality, and we'll be no, I don't love his purely spiritual. The Hebrew is kamalachim, okay, like angels, angelic. The Ramchal in different books, and I'm sure we'll get to it later in this book, does believe in the resurrection of the dead in an ultimate sense, that yes, there will be this time of the Messiah where there might be some resurrection of the dead, but ultimately that world, that what we call Olam Haba, the world to come, there will be a body. Now, the body will be very different to how it is today. It will be purified. It will just be almost like a vessel to contain the soul. But that's the purpose. They will be divested of gross physicality they now possess, and of its negative consequences, the evil inclination and its effect. So that's also interesting that the evil inclination is, hey Lev, welcome.
Hey, thank you.
The evil inclination is associated with the body, even though there are very spiritual evil inclinations, right? The desire for honor, right? That's a very spiritual yearning. Yet somehow it's attached to the physicality we have. Once we become angelic, we will lose that. Even in the Messianic era, which is before the end of the 6,000 years, right? That's our tradition. The Talmud that he's quoting over there from Rosh Hashanah Sanhedrin says, the first 2,000 years were something called Tahu Ovahu, chaos in the world, chaos reigned supreme. The next 2,000 years were the 2,000 years, it says, of Torah. That was really the giving of the Torah, and then the explanation of it, the expounding of it until the end of the Talmud. And then the last 2,000 years are really, it says, Yomot HaMashiach, they are the times that the Messiah might come. So it's clear that the Messianic era is before the end of the 6,000. In fact, it says over there that there's 6,000 years, then there's 1,000 years of Shabbat, which is the world is desolate again. And then there's the, from then on, there's this resurrected world with the people and, okay. So he says here, even in the Messianic era, which is before the end of 6,000 years, the evil inclination will disappear. I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh, and I will cause you to keep my laws, Yechezkel says. Furthermore, King Shlomo speaks of the years when you will say, I have no desire in them. That's from Kohelet, from Ecclesiastes. The sages tell us that this refers to the Messianic era, when there will be no possibility of earning reward or incurring guilt. The reason for this is clear. When a man has been purified of the evil inclination, he will have no choice but to serve God. Therefore, he will not be deserving of praise. So, for those of you who are into Rav Dessler at the moment, right, that's very consistent, right? Your merit is when you work. If you don't need to work on it because it's so clear, because you have no Yetzer Hara, there's nothing telling you otherwise, your choices to serve God are less meaningful, and therefore they're not going to, it's not praiseworthy that you serve God, right? It's not praiseworthy that the angel serves God. It's only praiseworthy when a person does, because a person could go either way. However, it's part of the process of the revelation of God's oneness. He allows the world to be swept along by the turbulent events of history for whatever length of time he chooses. At such times, evil...
Rabbi?
Yes.
Sorry, is it only humans that could go against the will of God? Like, is that it? Like, animals are not, and spiritual beings are not. So is it just the humans?
That's what it seems like. There definitely do seem to be exceptions, right? The one exception is the fruit trees in the Garden of Eden. The bark, the tree was meant to taste like the fruit, but that did not happen. The Maharal of Prague says it wasn't really a choice. It's just that once God made an imperfect world, things like that happen. And also, there is something about some angels that rebelled, but basically, it's the human being who is the chooser. Okay. So
Can I ask
Are we
where
still
this,
reading the same text, or is this a different text?
oh, yes, sorry, Lev. I actually took photos of the book. So we're on page 63 of the Knowing God's Plan. I decided to use this version.
Okay.
See if that works better for us. I think the English is a little bit more flows better, and I think it's better. It's a better well, it's a good translation. Okay.
where does that 6,000 years come from?
Where do they know that from? I don't know. I don't.
I mean, it's
know
coming up in a couple hundred years, right? So
Yes, we're in 5782. So there's 218
18.
years left. So yeah.
Maximum, right? It's within this time.
Right.
Could be tomorrow.
Right. It could be
I should
tomorrow.
like freeze myself like Ted Williams. Is that what you're saying? It's coming soon. So
Basically, yes. Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it's been a pretty strong tradition. Yeah, I hope we get to see it. Okay, let's go on. Okay, however, okay, so the world will come to its end, right? That's a Jewish idea. This idea of I'm not sure what they really mean by Armageddon, or the second coming, right? That I think those concepts came from this idea of a messianic era, and what he is explaining to us here, which is really important, is that the messianic era is a time of clarity. It's a time when the evil inclination disappears and the whole world comes to a recognition of God. I think he speaks about it a little bit more. Let's see. However, it's part of the process of the revelation of God's oneness. Since this is a process, he allows the world to be swept along by the turbulent events of history for whatever length of time he chooses. At such times, evil prevails in the world. In the end, however, this will lead to the demonstration of God's total mastery over everything. Right? If God's able to undo all of our sorrows, right? Take us out of all of our misery, undo every evil and wrong thought, that's pretty impressive. We'll come to really understand, to know him in some respect. In the meantime, he does not prevent evil from doing everything in its power, even if it brings the world to the abyss of darkness. This in no way means that the world is going to self-destruct. Even at such times, God's power is absolute. He brought about everything, meaning even the evil, as we've spoken. He bears everything while it lasts, and he inflicted the wound, and he will heal it. There's nothing that does not come from God. All of this should provide great strength to the faith of the Jewish people and prevent us from becoming discouraged by the length and terrible bitterness of our present exile. And right, he's writing this in the 1600s sometime. On the contrary, God is the one who allows evil to do everything it possibly can, as I explained above. In the end, the more evil inflicts its burden of suffering upon the world, the greater will be the revelation of God's total oneness and of his absolute and unlimited power over everything that exists. This is a difficult point because according to this, well, there is real benefit for things getting really bad. It's almost like, to the degree of darkness will be the clarity of light. If this revelation of God's oneness, of his uniqueness, of his total control over everything, and the God's ability ability to overcome any obstacle, and that there is no other force or fulfillment anywhere. To the degree that other things show their prowess, it makes a statement. It makes a greater statement when God reveals it. But it's clear, and we'll see from the next section, it does not have to be this way, right? It's a point. I don't know really what to do with it. What happened? If it's not this way, so then was something about the revelation missing? Are we missing something? Not sure. We'll have to work on that. From amidst the very depth of the numerous and terrible travails, God will most assuredly cause the redemption to spring forth through his awesome power. Okay. Okay. Part 5. The revelation of God's oneness can come about in 2 different ways. Okay, so says the Seichel. In reality, people could bring about this revelation through the merit of their own deeds. Okay, let's see what he means by this, because he's going to go into soon what this meant for Adam and then what it means for his children, for us. It changes. So let's see how this will come. Bear in mind, this might only be speaking about how Adam was in the Garden of Eden. After that, it might not operate. Let's see. They could recognize the truth and abandon the false ways of this world through their desire to come close to God. So, that's free choice. Free choice is, on the one hand, we're faced with truth. On the other hand, we're faced with falsity, but it has its lure. It lures us towards it. If we choose, meaning if our ratzon, if we will it, if we want it, so then we can choose the truth. They would have to come to the clear realization that anything contradicting the path God has commanded is part of the evil that he chose to create through the concealment of his perfect goodness. So they would then reject the deceptive illusions of this world and choose to draw themselves close to the hidden and concealed light, the life-giving light of the presence of God. So you could do this, right? A person could make these choices, can come to that realization. If they do all of this, if mankind would do this, the revelation of God's oneness would be brought about by their own actions, right? And they would hasten the ultimate redemption. God would have no need to reveal his oneness through the travails of a prolonged exile. They would have recognized the truth for themselves, and that would be enough. The truth would now be clear. Having experienced evil and recognizing it for what it is, and having made the decision to separate themselves from it and attach themselves to God's true oneness, they would have done everything necessary. Okay, so I just want to see. Yeah, I don't know. You got to be so careful with translation. In the Hebrew, it's not the experience. He says over here, having experienced evil and recognizing it for what it is. In the Hebrew, it says, kevan shekva ra'u hara vehikiru, right? Once they would have seen the evil and recognize it. Not, it's very important. I don't think he means experience here. He means that one could see it for what it is and abandon it. So this is because the whole purpose of creation, once again, is only that people should come to recognize the truth of these matters with absolute clarity. As a result, they would have delighted from then on in the experience of the true reality that had been revealed to them. Once all this had been revealed to them, nothing else would be necessary. Note that this was the situation of Adam, as I will explain. It is important for you to understand this matter properly. Had God created a world that was totally good, without any evil whatsoever, the human mind could not have even had any concept of evil. As a result, it would have been impossible to understand God's oneness in its total sense. As I explained above, you need evil in order to understand God's oneness. However, once God created a world that included evil, the human mind was certainly able to have a conceptual awareness of evil, and through this, to recognize the true nature of God's oneness. Adam already knew about the existence of evil. This was the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which God forbade him to eat from. Despite this, he was deceived into thinking that it was something desirable to look at and good to eat and attractive as means of gaining knowledge. As it says in the verse, the woman saw that the tree was good to eat and desirable to the eyes, and obviously she told him, and he listened. We see that Adam was already aware that there was the possibility of making a mistake, God forbid, and falling prey to the notion that there are two competing powers that rule the world, or to any of the other false ideas that the snake suggested to them. And one of the things you'll see in note 50 here, he brings it in, is that the snake says to Adam, to Eve, on the day you eat from this tree, you will be like God, to know good and bad. So it's interesting. I don't know why he separates this competing powers that rule the world from all the other false ideas, but that's pretty much to me what it sounds like, that the snake was, the snake was the incarnation of evil in the world. Now, they had not experienced it. They didn't know what it meant to partake of it, but they understood that it existed. Now, Adam was extremely wise, and he should have used his wisdom, his seichel, to elevate the situation properly. In fact, his wisdom already enabled him to see the truth on a conceptual level. He knew that anything contradicting the true path of perfection that God had shown him was false and deceitful. So he knew that as truth. It was just part of the evil God created in order to reveal his absolute oneness and to test man so as to give him reward. Meaning, if anything contradicting the true path of perfection was false and deceitful, why does it exist in God's world? Oh, because it's only there because God desires it to be there in order to one day get rid of it, overcome it, to reveal his oneness. And that allows man to be tested and to get rewarded. Had he
something. Sorry.
Do you want to ask it now, or you want to just see how he finishes off this idea?
I'm stuck on the fact that I had always imagined that Adam existed and Eve in a state of innocence. That is to say, they were already in the perfect world and they could not be aware of evil or good. They're already in, as it were, messianic times, so to speak. And the snake didn't incarnate evil. He revealed the potential for good and evil in the world. But the world of Adam wasn't a world of God's. It's a different world than Adam was sent into once he had eaten of the tree of good and evil. It was a world of innocence and lack of awareness. So he couldn't be praised for good deeds, as he said earlier. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, but the Ramchal, seems to, well, put it this way, what does God say to Adam and Eve? He says, don't eat from this tree, and from, if you do, you're going to die. If you do, you'll bring bad things into yourself and into the world. So the question is, what would have happened had Adam not eaten from the tree? Right? Would the temptation for eating it have always remained, or would he have then, and especially in the construct that we're talking about, that God only created evil in order to one day abolish it, would that have happened there and then? Which is going to be his thesis over here, that would have happened there and then. In order for that to make sense in this construct, there had to be some evil in the world. Yes, it was very different to what happened afterwards, and that's why I was very particular about his translation of experience. They were pure. They had never experienced evil, but they could see it. They could see as you could use the word potential, that's fine. But that in itself is enough evil in the world to have tested Adam and Eve And had they then clarified for themselves and said, no, 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 that's just, they would have worked out this whole thing. Then, as he says here, had he withstood the test and actually strengthened his faith, rather than allowing himself to be deceived by the negative inclination, he would have attained a true understanding of God's absolute oneness. So it's the same dynamic, right? Overcoming evil in order to understand God's absolute oneness. He had already seen what evil was and gained a conceptual awareness of it. Through his wisdom, he also realized that all evil was created by God, only as a means to reveal his glory. All he needed to do was strengthen his faith and not disobey God's command. And even that was only until the onset of Shabbos, as our sages have told us. So he has a tradition from who does he quote here? Okay, it's not. I don't know if it's in there in Sanhedrin in the Talmud, but it could be. That was the length of time. It was just an Erev Shabbos. Had to just get through Erev Shabbos without shouting at the wife. The Mashiach would have come. That's all it takes. So then God would have brought about in one day what in the end would take 6,000 years of history to achieve. So, if you think about it in terms of this was the 6th day of creation, and then Shabbat was going to come, it mirrors, right? So, the first opportunity was, okay, Adam, hold back, right? Recognize the truth through your own deeds. That's why I think what he said before, over here, that people could bring this revelation through merit of their own deeds, that they could recognize the truth and abandon the false ways of the world. That's only talking about Adam, right? That opportunity to recognize the truth for what it is and recognize evil for what it is and turn your back on evil, that would have been achieved by Adam in that one moment, right? In that one afternoon. After that, we got 6,000 years of history, right? And I don't think it's so easy. So God would have removed all evil from the world in one brief moment, and Adam would have experienced the absolute truth of God's oneness, something he had believed until that point through faith alone. Yeah.
But the point is, right, that the evil had to be in the way anyway. So it that wouldn't have then shown God's greatness, right? I mean, if Adam resisted, there wouldn't have been any evil to overcome. That would have been like the minimum, right?
That would have been apparently enough evil that, yes, God, but through man's own recognition, the evil would have been destroyed, right? And God would have then.
There was that bit from before earlier in the hour where it was to the degree that things are terrible is a sense of how much powerful God is at overcoming.
Yes, that's why I got stuck on that point as well.
But here it's like if Adam had just not eaten and that's Shabbos, and then God destroys all the evil ever, and then we're done, then he never gets to show. I mean, that's still then sufficient to satisfy
that would have been sufficient. So maybe that should give us pause to think about how hard the test was, because there had to be a lot of something very appealing in that tree of knowledge of good and bad in order for the whole purpose of the world to have been able to be achieved with that.
By resisting that temptation.
Yeah. I want to.
But the sin of Adam is one of curiosity then, not of evil desires and cravings, other than curiosity, because he could not have seen evil yet. All he knew was the word existed conceptually. How did he yet see evil?
Well, it's a good look what the way he says it, because that's the next paragraph, right? But right in the beginning, Adam was seduced by his desires and cravings. He therefore created distorted ideas for himself in order to justify what he wanted to do. So, yeah, you have to say that, to the degree that the Sforno says that the snake is a parable. The snake is a parable. It's the Yetzer Hara. It's that inner, so we all know the difference between having a desire and having to face up, understanding that desire and then experiencing that desire, right? They're very different. So Adam had the desire, yeah. He was naive in the sense that he had never experienced it, but he knew it. He could see it. He could maybe feel it, right? Here I have these desires, and then he distorts. Now, let's just finish the paragraph. This is similar to the statement of our sages. The Jewish people only became involved in idol worship in order to allow themselves to openly engage in forbidden relations, right? This is the world of, right? This is the world of rationalization, right? We rationalize our decisions. So there are two, indeed, the sages said Adam ended up denying the oneness of God. He was a heretic. Why was Adam a heretic? Because how could he do this without somehow coming up with an idea that there was something besides God? So there are two things I just wanted to point out on this page. One is he uses the phrase emunah a lot, faith, right? So faith is only necessary when you live in a world that is not 100% clear, right? If you have perfect clarity, you don't need faith. I know I'm speaking to you guys. I can see you and I hear you. And there's no faith here. I don't know if David's going to listen to the share later. That I need to have faith for, right? There's nothing, he could, might not. It's an unknown. So in a world which has evil, in order to even recognize the truth and attach oneself to it, one does need to have faith, right? You cannot come to 100% clarity in a world of evil, because evil says there's a different possibility, right? It might not be, right? Your belief in one God and that's the only way to go? Not so sure, right? Not so sure. So that's what it says in the Talmud. It says a very interesting Gemara that brings down different people that kind of reduce the essence of the Torah to one phrase. And Chavakuk, the prophet, says, "Tzadik be'emunato yichya." The tzaddik lives through his emunah, his faith. It really boils down to faith. The second thing is that, okay, so you need faith, but it's the truth, right? You can have faith in the truth, of course, God, and that's the truth. Well, the alternate is much weaker. So how does the weaker how does the Yetzer Hara, which has a weaker argument really, right? What's it really offering us, right? God's offering us eternity. The Yetzer Hara is offering us a one-night stand. I mean, come on. You can't compare the two. So he says, that's where distorted ideas, rationalization comes in. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is only able to get us to do what he wants. I'm talking about him as something separate, but, to do its bidding because he's able to send ideas into our mind, right? Our sense of truth gets distorted, and therefore we're able to then, okay, yes, we then choose, right? What he wanted to do. Ultimately, it boils down to ratzon. Okay, so, right, and then that's why we're in the middle with the choice. Okay. So Uri, does that make more sense?
I'm not yet sure.
I mean, Dad, my problem with your formulation as you expressed it is that you are essentially saying that Adam is not culpable under any circumstances, because you're saying that his naivete and his innocence of the choice, it obviates his responsibility from making that conscious choice to do something that he knows he's not supposed to do. So it's sort of like ignorance of the law is not an excuse for, when you violate something, right? In some codes of law, if you don't know that you're breaking the law by doing something, if you're still violating the law, you can't use that I just didn't know that I was doing something wrong necessarily as a defense. So, and if the way the story is being told to us is the way it happened, it says that Adam knew he was doing something wrong. You're seeming to suggest that he doesn't really know he's doing anything wrong by taking a bite, but that's not the way the narrative is sort of expressed on the page.
Where does it say that Adam knew he was doing wrong?
We have to look at Bereshit. I don't know. It may not say in the literal text, but the interpretation.
Well, from the very fact that God told him not to eat from it, he knew it was wrong. Right? Is this, even the snake even has to contend with that, right? The snake comes to Eve and says, is this the tree that God told you not to eat from? And then he starts to undo that idea. So, the command itself is enough to make it known to Adam and Eve that it was wrong. Okay, let's go on. As a result of Adam's sin, and now this, to me, this is a crucial point. As a result of Adam's sin, it became necessary for him to personally experience, and here is a very good translation, right? In the Hebrew, as hutzrach laharot lo b'mofet ma shelo ratza lahasig mitzad yediato. So he needed to personally experience what he did not want to grasp through knowledge, right? So you can, we've all had that. We all probably went through the experience, right? With children also, right? You can be told that if you touch the oven, right, the stove, you're going to burn yourself. That's one way of knowing. Yeah, I understand. I'm a scientist. I see, I've seen people burn themselves. There's another way to know that the ovens are not good to touch. Is when you touch them, you learn through experience. So this would involve experiencing through the course of history the reality of evil itself, or the lack of reality of evil itself. And seeing how in the end, it makes way for the total dominion of God's goodness, even though it had previously been allowed to wreak such havoc and destruction, right? So enter the 6,000 years of history, right? What he didn't achieve in the 6 days is now taking 6,000 years. Um, okay, it's interesting. This is the first time he's really used the word goodness. It's a good translation. He does say Hatov hayechidit. So this would be through the travails and difficulties of this world that were decreed on Adam. In this way, man will eventually attain the faith that he was unwilling to achieve at first. Now, is that a good okay. Interesting that he uses now the word faith. Why does he use the word faith and not yediyah, understanding?
Perhaps because exactly what you explained, which was that as Adam, all he had to go by was faith. Namely, he was told by God, don't eat it. It's the wrong thing to do. Didn't really understand the wrongness of it. He simply was told, as a child is told, don't touch the oven. It's not a good idea. And so he had to go by faith, and he didn't have the scientific understanding or the proof-driven understanding.
But Ori, after he was that faith necessary after things became clarified? Meaning, or look at this.
No, I think
What
that's
he
the
needed to
point.
do,
I think I really find this discussion really, really interesting. Thank you, Rabbi. This is really nice. I think that the faith that Amcha is writing here is the faith that is the initial faith before eating of the fruit. Then it was faith. Now that he already ate of the fruit, he'll be proven by experience. But he says, I mean, I'm reading along in the Hebrew as you're reading it in the English,
okay.
and it says, and so I'll translate. So that finally he would come to the belief that he didn't want to face in the beginning. Namely, I think that he's using the word faith for what he should have had in the beginning, not faith that he needs to come to afterwards. Afterwards, it won't be a matter of faith. Afterwards, he'll be proven that he should.
So, okay.
I know, I see that in the English, it says, in this way, man will eventually attain the faith. In the Hebrew, it's not really clear that he's talking about coming to have a faith. Yeah, I guess he leaves it vaguely, but because in the beginning of the sentence, he says, finally he'll come to that faith. But then at the end of the sentence, he says,
right,
he'll come to the faith that he didn't want to have in the beginning. So is the beginning the faith, or is the faith also subsequent? I think we're probably splitting hairs here with regards to the word. But
it could be.
But it relates to what Uri asked in the beginning.
Yeah.
It could be. There are many statements in the Talmud about getting back to the level of Adam. It seems to be that the world will somehow go through a transition where we'll get back to the level of Adam and then have to go through again some sort of test. It says that by Sinai, by the way. It says that the Jewish people at Sinai achieved the level of Adam in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden. And the test of the golden calf was their tree of knowledge of good and bad, right? So it seems to be that you can get back to that situation, but then you already, right? That's already a fulfillment. Let's see, this would have been, in this way, man will eventually attain the faith that he was unwilling to achieve at first. However, now he would have to arrive at this understanding through the direct experience of each aspect of evil, whereas Adam could have grasped the whole thing with total clarity all at once. No, I'm still not convinced. But anyway, the difference between Adam before the sin and after the sin is very clear, right? So before, Adam is at a level where he could turn his back on evil with clarity in one foul swoop. That once you choose it, it's a whole different thing. You know, it's, I don't know if a parable, we need one. You know, to me, it's like heroin. You know, you could turn your back on heroin knowing that it's crazy, stupid, a ridiculous thing to do. People that take it even once have a lifetime of work to get back to even the choice, right? And then it becomes a choice again. So that's the difference between before and after. Okay.
There's also that he had the, like, I never always wondered about this fruit of good and evil business. Like, what does that even mean? But he had the choice to not actually have to learn about good and evil. If he had faith, he would never have had to, we would never have had to eat all of that good and evil. But the good and the evil part, which is now what we all have to go through.
Right.
Always sort of puzzled, like, what's the point of that? So I think what you're saying here is if by that act of faith, we could have foregone all of that trouble.
Yeah.
Like God's saying, don't eat the good and the evil. You don't need to eat the good and evil. Have faith. Don't do it.
Right.
And Adam went and did it. And now here we are, eating
Just
good and evil.
But building on that and relating to your comment by the rabbis about being like the people at Sinai being in the state of Adam, I was just struggling with the notion of Naaseh v'nishma. Is the Naaseh v'nishma, we shall do and then we shall hear. Is that in the Tanakh or is that rabbinical commentary?
No, well, the order is in the Torah itself.
Okay, so the order here is Naaseh, which implies faith, and then Nishma, we will understand. I was just wondering if there's an analogy in the use of that phrase between Adam's situation in the garden and the people at Sinai. In both cases, what God was asking was Naaseh.
Right, you have to do it because that's the choice.
Without at that point having the ability to understand. I don't know if that's a useful
I like it. I like it
rabbit hole.
Because if you would, you know, if basically if yichud means that there's nothing worthwhile besides God, right? If that's right, what's he saying? What do you mean there's nothing besides God? What's all this evil? Yeah, it's an illusion. It's worthlessness. It's just there to tempt us in order to, you know, so there's nothing worthwhile besides God. A beautiful way of saying that would be, Naaseh v'nishma, I'll do whatever he says because by definition, that's what's good for me. So I like that. That could be where they reached the level of Adam before the sin. But then, again, they're tempted by this. You know, you'd have to reread the story of the sin of the golden calf and see, well, you know, how does that parallel? I'm going to look. Maybe I'm sure there's a wonderful rabbi. Actually, he spent some time in Baltimore. David Foreman. Don't know if any of you are familiar with him, but he makes beautiful parallels all through the Torah. I'm sure this is one he's done. Okay, gentlemen, it's 9:30. We're on page 73. 75. Oh, yeah. Okay, we are finished. Okay, 5 more minutes, because then we can finish this section. The same was true for Adam's descendants as well. Had they wanted to grasp the truth of God's absolute oneness and use their wisdom to make this knowledge part of their very being, that would have been enough. All of this was needed for them to come to this realization. Once it would have been clear to them, nothing else would have been necessary. But they did not manage to bring this about throughout their own actions. Instead, they followed deceptive, superficial falsehood and accepted all those evil ideologies I mentioned above. So here he says, but it is true for Adam's descendants, right? So even though it's knowledge through experience, it seems to be that even with knowledge through experience, there's enough to experience to come to grasp the truth. Once it had been clear to them, nothing else would have been necessary, but they did not manage to bring this about through their own actions. Instead, they followed deceptive, superficial falsehood and accepted all those evil ideologies I mentioned above. Therefore, God must reveal to them what they are unable to grasp through their own knowledge. He does this by hiding his presence more and more until evil predominates in the world to the ultimate extent, just as we see now in our present exile. So he felt we'd reached the bottom. This is what our sages referred to when they said, there is no day whose curse is not greater than the previous one. But in the end, the one master will suddenly enter his palace and his glory will be revealed for the entire world. I wonder if he is not referring here to the generations before the flood, the generations before the dispersion. Maybe those generations could have come to this knowledge, made the decision, made it part of themselves without the need for the rest. Not sure. Now that God's presence is so greatly hidden from the world, attitudes have become totally distorted and man's actions have become corrupt. As a result, the world itself has become damaged, lessened in stature. This is what the sages meant when they said the original superior taste of fruit has been taken away after the destruction of the temple. So it's not black and white. There are degrees over here, right? The world with a temple is on a much higher level than the world without a temple. We are witnessing with our own eyes all other terrible things that our sages told about us. The world is desolated and void in fulfillment of the words of the sages. Insolence will abound and people will crave for honor, right? Chutzpah yaske. There'll be a lot of chutzpah in the world, right? Wisdom will be scorned. Those who fear sin will be despised. The truth will disappear. It's all in the Gemara and Sota. All of this is due to the intensification of the power of evil. But when when the time comes for God's glory to be revealed, proper attitudes will return. People's actions will be corrected and they will be drawn close to God. As it says, I will pour my spirit of wisdom and truth upon all people. One will no longer need to teach another about God's existence because everyone will know me, young and old alike. That's through experiential knowledge. The whole world will long to elevate themselves through attachment to God's holiness. As it says, many nations will go to each other and say, let us go up to God's mountain, to the temple mount in Jerusalem, and he will teach us about his ways so we can follow his paths. The entire natural world will be greatly enhanced and transformed by all this. As it says, loaves of bread will grow on the mountaintops, and the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the kid. So, I don't know if we are able to do this meaning, can human beings, through their choice and recognition of the truth, bring the world to its completion? Or are we now, it would seem, that we are now at a stage where no, it must come through God's revelation when he decides to reveal it. Although there are many statements about the fact that if we merit it, we can merit the coming of the Messiah. So I'm not sure. But it seems that's the way it's going to happen. Okay, questions, comments?
I have a question. What if at the end of the 6,000 years, God decides, it wasn't enough and he wants to make it 60,000 years? But like you guys asked in the beginning, where did this idea of 6,000 years come from?
I think it's, I'll look it up to see if there's a verse, but it's a tradition. It's a tradition we have. So yeah. Liv,
Yes.
Taimuna, of course it's gonna happen. Right? Yeah, we're wondering, you're wondering, so what are the rabbis, how are the rabbis? No, not 6,000 years like you know it, 6,000 years, right? But the point being that there is an end in sight, right? I believe this is the source of hope for Judeo-Christian ethic, right? There's a deep-seated hope in that most people have that life could get better for the individual, better for society, better for the world. It's crazy, right? The world's we're not getting better, so or maybe we are, not sure. All right, gents, have a wonderful week. Thank you again. Thank you for doing this with me because I really enjoy it.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good night.